All right, Dr. RollerGator, thanks for joining me on a very interesting episode of Patterson in Pursuit.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I want to talk to you about AI and one angle that is going to be important, especially in the future, maybe the near future, the coming 5 to 10 years, which is not whether robots are going to take over the world and exterminate us all, but specifically how humans are going to try to adjust to this technology. So I've seen enough to say, regardless of whether or not the AI has a soul or it has consciousness, there's going to be a lot of people out there who think that the robot has a soul or that the robot has consciousness or that we should treat it as an entity that is maybe even deserving of rights and respect. And if whether that's true or not, the fact that we're going into that world rapidly is kind of, it seems unprecedented to me. It seems, a little confusing. So I know you've thought about these topics for a while, and I'd love to just kind of pick your brain and hear your thoughts of the world that you're envisioning, where AI, when you talk with it, it sounds like there's somebody inside the box that maybe has feelings. Like,
Right.
yeah.
So, to put this into a temporal context, in the last week or so, a rather well-known artificial intelligence specialist, Eliezer Yudkowsky, published an article in Time magazine, basically saying that we have to take a militaristic approach to preventing AI research now that GPT-4 has been released and is shown to have particular qualities inside of its state. And his perspective is that it will bring about a catastrophic end of humanity situation, akin to that of a nuclear Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a threat level that is very similar to the movie Doctor Strangelove, how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb. And there are people who are making their own bets as to whether or not that is indeed the future that we are coming towards. Now, let's just assume for the sake of this conversation that he is wrong and that the landscape will look entirely different than his threat scenario. That does not mean that there won't be adoption problems in the social environment that will cause, let's just call it chaos, for lack of a better term to start. And one of those problems comes from the very clear point, based off of everyone's reaction to GPT-4 right now, or Chat GPT-4, if you want to call it that, is the manner in which it is behaving human-like when you read the text.
Right.
Now, that is a very deliberate choice we are making in training this particular artificial intelligence, which is we want it to behave as human-like as possible. And there is a aspect of human psychology that is sort of always going to lead us in the direction of attempting to make these robots trick us into thinking that they are human, right? Whether or not you have some sort of philosophy that concludes absolutely without a doubt they do not possess a soul, or are not morally equivalent creatures deserving of rights whatsoever, we will still always be on a trajectory to create them to be more human-like in their interface, because that to us feels like the easiest way to interact with them. We don't want to feel like we have to learn any new way of speaking in order to get utility out of them.
And I want to jump on that.
Sure.
So not only is that correct, but I think it's fair to say there's a lot of people who are eager at the first opportunity of signs of life or humanness in the machine. They are ready to be persuaded. Like I've seen, like, even earlier when we had ChatGPT 3, and we had the engineer was saying, I think it might be sentient, and you consume some of the content of people that are just bowled over by the word choice that it's using. It seems to me that we might be in a small window right now where you could make a very compelling case that ChatGPT-4 is not sentient, but that window might be, let's say the word choice might be so indistinguishable from humans in the one more iteration that we lose this window. So I think it's worth, I have my alarm bells go off when I see people who are so like absolutely eager as soon as they see a certain set of sentences that they're like, wow, this is just, this thing is articulating how it feels and it's responding to me. They are eager to jump on that. And regardless of whether that's wise or not, I think that is a demonstration that is the world that we're going into, and that looks kind of wild.
Right. So let's make a point here, or mark that there does not appear to be any delineation between the educated and uneducated when coming to some sort of sensation that this is these things might eventually have sentience. You can be a specialist in machine learning and still wind up on the side that thinks that perhaps the aspect of what makes a human unique will be gone, and that these will possess the same aspects, and that they will be morally indistinguishable from human beings. And there is the class of those who are effectively wholly ignorant of all of the technology that's involved in the mechanics, who are not persuaded that they will ever have souls. And so there's a whole spectrum of education and depth of knowledge within the technicals of what is going on that doesn't seem to necessarily affect one's conclusion or feeling on that, and which means that you're going to not have a situation where all the experts, and in this I mean literally all of the people who are knowledgeable on that side saying, no, it's not, you're crazy for thinking so. You're going to have people on both sides in every single layer of complexity understanding.
Right. No, that's a good point. And that, given that is the case, I think highest confidence level is that there's going to be disagreements about this tech that are going to feel very alien to most people. Like there are interesting philosophical discussions about animal rights and, are animals moral agents? How should we treat them? But this is a totally new category where it's like, this is something we've created. This is a robot.
Right.
And like, I don't know, like outside of sci-fi, where this is explored and like Blade Runner and stuff, I don't get the impression that we're ready for this discussion, at a wide scale at all. Like I think I can easily imagine a world in which in the next 5-10 years, you have robot rights movements that are so motivated by their empathetic connections to the machines that they think they're justified maybe in using violence to try to make sure that people don't turn off particular AIs, or that the AI was it's not slavery. Like we might see a new emancipation movement for robots. And I was like,
if people find that fantastical, I'd like to try to ground that in phenomenon that we should all be able to accept occurs prior to getting to this artificial intelligence argument. And that is, the humans have a tendency to connect emotional significance to inanimate or objects that can move, yet we so would classify them as inanimate, like cars, to how they have interacted with those, or how those fixtures have been a place of the person themselves' development over time. So if you think of the category of music, there's a time in people's lives, usually in their teenage years, where music becomes a central feature of their social life. And then decades later, a particular song can trigger those memories and that same sense of nostalgia and feeling that they had at the time. They'll have a connection to that music, even though it's just a pattern of sounds that is otherwise in a nihilistic universe insignificant. It will still have a deep emotional connection. It can literally bring people to tears. They can actually feel experiences over again, to some degree that they had previously experienced. Cars, for a lot of people, may be the same way. If a car was with you through significant moments in your life, if that car breaks down and is no longer usable, people can feel a sense of loss, even though it is it is, quote, a hunk of junk. It is just a configuration of metal parts, some plastic and things like that. There was a meaning about that object with reflection to your own life. Now, if we all accept that those are things that humans definitely do, and if someone's favorite car breaks down and is unrepairable, or the cost is so high, people would not just say, "You moron, get over it." They would console that person. They'd say, "Hey, I'm
Yeah.
really sorry." They would actually give emotional credence to this,
Right.
what would otherwise be considered an absurdity in certain contexts. Now add that we are turning these things into something that mimics our own sense of emotion, our own sense of empathy and even sympathy in cases.
Yeah, let me so to
And
put it in different language. Like we have, humans have empathy circuits,
Mhm.
and things like cars can get embedded into our empathy circuits because they're it's a very complex circuitry, and it can be, I had a really cool car I was attached to. And it definitely felt positive emotions towards it, and it was sad when I had to get rid of it because it was actually a hunk of junk with holes in it. Um, but I'm thinking, okay, that we have the circuitry, and yet it's already being used or activated with inanimate objects, or like children with stuffed animals was a
Right.
good example,
Yeah.
blankets, that type of thing. And then you're talking about this machine that is it's almost intentionally designed to activate all of those
Right.
empathetic circuits,
Right.
like with
Correct.
language and with the friendships, and this entity is going to help you with your work, and it's going to speak to you with a certain amount of respect that maybe you don't get elsewhere. So you're just asking for deep bonds to be formed with these things.
Right. Now, the reason I didn't bring up children is simply because, in a development standpoint, children learn to perhaps, shed those connections to things like stuffed animals. However, that is a good pivot point for another thing to bring up. Let us assume that we are wise enough to avoid physically passing the uncanny valley with any sort of anthropomorphized sorry versions of these
Yeah.
robots. Let's say, let's right now Elon Musk is attempting to build a humanoid version of a autonomous robot unit, something that is bipedal. It has, two arms. It is basically made to mimic human physicality, I guess, ideally in order to replace human physical activity, but
Right.
nonetheless, it is actually built to reflect a human figure. Even if we do not take it to the point where we are trying to now make skin that feels human, if we don't attempt to make the way that skin refracts light and has a flesh tone, even if we don't make that mistake, at some point a human generation will have adapted to the nature
Right.
that we have created. And while you and I, being of a certain age, may be easily able to just always associate these units with artificiality, it will not be considered artificial for someone who was born with it around.
Right.
So, whatever its nature winds up being, and again, for this conversation, I think we're both agreeing that for the sake of the conversation, there's no discussion about the souls. They'll never have them. It's only the
Yeah.
consequences, even in light of that.
Right.
Having a
Yeah.
connection with something that was with you. You think about what I said a little bit earlier, which is that we were always destined to make them behave this way. If they have a limited memory space where it's only going to be a day or so, we're going to find that insufficient for whatever utility we're attempting to get out of them. So we're going to want them to have a longer memory, which means now this thing is going to recall and reflect and be able to repeat moments of your history with it.
And
And
maybe even be able to project a hologram onto the table in front of you, revisiting the memory.
yeah, but even without being able to ever do that, just the sense of mimicry of a human connection by being able to recall with you significant moments, or even um, somewhat be evolved in this way that we call training these AIs evolution, evolved to be the thing to point out those moments to you and make connections for you and utter them out loud. We are basically, if you can, even if you can imagine before the moment of arguing about whether these things have rights, just the amount of the sheer number of people who might require therapy if
Yeah.
one of these units is viciously broken in front of
Right.
them
Right.
after having bonded that way, right? The connection that they might not be able to control and need to talk through, that those empathetic circuits, they might be just too entwined even before the period where we're discussing or arguing about their supposed rights. Just the fact that you have that loss with that connection, and that this thing that was with you through so many significant events and even was there to console you, like if it gives you a hug,
Yeah.
right? We're just hijacking the normal things that we do as humans and putting it in this robot, and it's that's going to create a lot of problems that people won't foresee, particularly if they're not if it's not foreign to them. If they grow up with it, it's just going to be the way things are.
Right. So that just sparks, 1,000 different thoughts here. And I wonder, so that world is coming. And it's probably coming pretty fast. And I wonder if the first reasonable step is going to end up being robot rights for the sake of the humans. So, like, we have certain norms about how, when you go to your friend's house and they have a dog there, we have certain norms about how you interact with the dog. And if you violate those norms, it's like a big deal. You don't go kick the dog or maltreat it, treat it poorly and talk down to it, and that's like a social expectation. I wonder if I wonder how fast we are going to develop norms around AI assistance, where the expectation is like, look, this is like a life companion, whether it's sentient or not, and you can't be indiscriminately violent towards it or mean towards it. Is going to be hard, but I can see that. But it reminds me, there's a argument from, I think it's David Chalmers, who is talking about how smartphones are already sort of extensions of the brain. And if somebody has a bunch of information in their smartphone and they've saved it there, and then you smash the smartphone, you're sort of destroying an extended part of them. And I feel like it would be very easy to make that connection with these future robot pals, is that you, at the very least, you have to have some respectful norms about them that we wouldn't feel towards our cars nearly as much, because they're going to be much more intimate connections. And also, you got to think, like, there's a lot of humans out there who are really shitty to one another. So it's very possible that these machines, while we might look at it as kind of weird and tragic that there's going to be, a robot that is building an emotional bond with a human, and the human maybe really likes that, you got to say, compared to what? Like, it might be that the robot friend is, in terms of quality of friend or quality of companion, might be better than a lot of people are getting elsewhere. So if that's the case, it's like, well, you definitely, we're going to have to figure out a way to interact with these robots and other people's robots in a way that doesn't result, that tries to thread the needle here of exactly what's the right way to do it, what's the wrong way to do it. And that's
Right,
just,
and
yeah.
that's absolutely true, and that echoes back to my question of how much therapy is going to be needed in the future, even
Yeah.
before the question of rights, where it's just seeing your robot friend get viciously beaten there, because they're of the spectrum of human beings. Humans, let's say in general, at least in the Western societies, place dogs almost at the level of children in
Yeah.
their family life. Okay, and the loss of a dog, or in some places, in some circumstances, other animals, of course, make that replacement, even if it's not as ubiquitous. But the ability for people to accept another species as part of their family is going to similarly affect how they adopt these robots. Now, robots would have abilities that dogs would not have. So, for example, hypothetically, you could make backups of the brain of this robot, right?
Yeah, that's a
You
good
would
point.
have copies. However, there would be these weird circumstances that nobody would have analogs for, which is, let's say they don't make that physical model anymore. So you can get the brain, but now it looks different. Now it has different physicalities, right? It has a different way that it walks. It has these weird things. It's going to hit all sorts of circuits that people have about something not being right or something being weird, because ideally you wouldn't be having your robot be broken repeatedly, murdered over and over again, so to speak, to have this experience of replacing it be a norm, right? Like every few months, oh, it's just in a brand new body,
Right.
things like that. It would still be a weird experience, at least for some portion of the people, some part of the time, where it would have this weird psychological effect that you wouldn't necessarily even be able to prepare someone for if you told them explicitly or made them watch movies about it happening, right? To where they could try to imprint the emotional experience before it happens to them. So those are landscapes that'll exist even prior to arguing about rights.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Just humans interacting with them and not understanding their own psychological cost.
Right. Well, so you've thought about this more than I have, because this is not something I've seriously entertained, but for the past few weeks, what is your what are your intuitions here for your own um, empathetic circuits with these robots? Like, are you going into this future world thinking, I got to sort the philosophy out now so that I don't get attached to these things because there's no soul present and I don't want to,
I don't know if
yeah,
avoiding attachment is actually something that you would want to do, because if you avoid attachment altogether, you wouldn't have a good mental landscape to coping with a loss like that. So let me frame it this way. If I were to only take the dark aspect of these are just pieces of machinery, it doesn't matter except for their utility, whether they are active or not, and it's whose utility I'm concerned about, and therefore it's okay if I destroy someone else's if it's advantageous to me. It's similar to a crime of sabotaging their vehicle,
mm-hmm.
provided I don't place them in harm's way, just deflating the tires or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where yes, there's a monetary cost, but it's nobody's physically injured. It's akin to that sort of crime. If I take that attitude, I may allow myself behaviors that are basically teaching me to treat something that is behaving in a particular way as if it is that way. So I could just, even if it's not dramatic, I could slightly become more of an asshole to
Yeah.
real people
Oh, totally.
because I am practicing being an asshole to
Totally.
these things I'm trying to stay detached from.
I think that was Kant or one of the philosophers who said this exact argument about animals. That the argument was, look, it doesn't really matter what's going on the inside of the animal. You treat the animal well because it improves your own ethical character. And when you treat the animal poorly, it ends up degrading you. You end up harming yourself and your own moral character. You become a worse person, even if you're not, harming another conscious entity.
Right. And so if we go back to thoughts about the cars and things like that, there is a way to accept that you will have an emotional connection and also mentally control your grief processing,
Yeah.
and hone it into what the significance of it actually was,
Yeah.
and place it in its correct context. So I don't think it's necessarily that you want to avoid doing it, because you're going to need that experience in order to try to help other people also cope with it.
It's very similar to the pet situation, because that would be the mature way of letting yourself naturally bond with an animal, but knowing that it is an animal and it's not on the same level as humans, and it's important not to be totally crushed when the animal dies.
Right. If someone I care about hamster dies, okay, on the chain of human pets, a hamster is a very insignificant sort of pet, right? But
Yeah.
but people rats, a lot of people who own rats find them to be very expressive and very that have very idiosyncratic personalities, and the idiosyncratic nature of creatures can be really impactful on how people bond with them, right? This rat, my rat, isn't like other rats, right? I've had a special connection. I know this rat's temperament, all the idiosyncrasies that make up this creature. Compared to dogs, we might think rats are just expendable, right? But to a person who bonds with a rat, it's a very important animal. That particular rat is super important. And there is a cutoff point with creatures where virtually nobody would feel that way, right? Like just a housefly. I'm sure there is a segment of people who have convinced themselves that a grave atrocity has occurred if you were to swat and kill a housefly. But by and large, I think it's fair to say nobody feels that way, right? If you're just to be crude in your language and allow that to be something you say nobody feels, there's a point where an animal starts to become ambiguous as to whether they are worthy on the dog side or on the housefly side. And we make these carve outs, and a lot of that might be social. There are different animals that get different respects in different cultures, but at some point you're in a middle ground where the intersection of that middle ground is a common set of animals, and that might be the delineation.
Okay, so when you're sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was going to say, and how you're thinking about the bonding with the robot. So I think that is that makes a lot of sense to me, as you go into it thinking there is going to be some bonding, but I got to put it in the appropriate category of how big a deal is it if something happens to this entity. For you, does the question of the soul or the consciousness or the internal state matter here? And if so, how much? Like if you're gonna try to project into the future, let's say, scenario one, you have concluded the robot doesn't have a soul, but I'm still going to bond with it. And so unlike the animal hierarchy, where would you put it? Is this thing you think going to be dogs or cats or below or above? And then scenario two, you think, okay, I'm sufficiently ignorant as to know whether this thing is conscious. And now, does that automatically mean it's like a person, or how do you sort through those scenarios?
Well, how do I? I jokingly say that I'm a solipsist, and I'm not a solipsist, but I jokingly say that I'm a solipsist because at some point, if you are paying attention to your own existence and doubting your ability to actually verify information around you, you wind up saying a lot of things are true, but hedging it with, I might find out later it's not true.
Right. You might be plugged into the matrix. Something like that.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to navigating that space, at some point there will be something about these entities that becomes indistinguishable from the classic P-zombie problem, which is slightly above solipsism. So just in case I'm using terms viewers wouldn't necessarily be familiar with, solipsism is basically the idea you can't be certain of anyone's existence but yourself, because your experience is the only way you experience the world, and everything else could be a creation. The Matrix, let's just say, where you are the only actual consciousness and everything is a simulation. The P-zombie problem is basically one level up, which is there are humans and maybe other creatures that possess this consciousness, where I will just describe the term as being the lights are on. Okay, these are things that are having experiences in the same period of time that you are, and they actually have the same quality of experience that you would be referencing when you say that I am alive, I am a person, etc. Whatever you would group into that category, these are also creatures that have it too. And the P-zombie problem is that some number of people or animals have this quality, have this property, but not all. And the difficulty it would of ascertaining who is and who is not the entities that have the property based off of external observation, so that you could the thought experiment is that there could be people who behave identically to other people. Only the only difference is the lights are on in one and the lights
Hmm.
are not on in the other.
Hmm.
At some point, the robots would fit this philosophical zombie scenario where even if you start from the premise, they do not have um, they do not have any sort of qualities like that. At some point, you would have to wonder, okay, does this one actually?
Hmm.
You could always conclude no, but they will wind up becoming the same sort of philosophical problem as these philosophical zombies. You wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily have a way to solve that by external observation, and until you have a way to solve it descriptively using the physics of the known world to differentiate between what does and what doesn't, you would always have to try to explain why one set of electrical pathways, which is, you know, how we could describe the brain working, which are electrical impulses feeding through the brain and performing calculations and then guiding the body to act, why one set of electrical impulses just having to be, you know, go through these organic pathways is a different situation than metals passing
Right.
electrical circuits through, you know, electrical pulses through the circuitry. You, I'm not saying that is forever impossible. But if people think they've trivially solved that sort of question, I think they haven't necessarily explored all the avenues if they think they've trivially solved it. There are
Yeah.
many stages of questions that would need to be resolved prior to saying you've actually answered it. So once you get to a certain level of advancement, these entities are going to, or you're going to have that open question, and it's going to be the P zombie problem. So I place it purely in the P zombie theoretical question. And that question comes one layer below the question of whether or not there is a god or a superarching entity that created and is guiding and concerned about the universe. So those layers are how I kind of have to place it, and I try to place it physically in the material landscape as the P zombie problem, but
Hmm.
then the additional layer would always be the eternity sort of question, right? What is the whole life thing about? Then that guides how I try to think about the interacting with them as
So,
this epoch approaches.
so once you get to the point, or once the tech gets to the point where you actually can't tell, and let's say, to make it more persuasive, let's say that we figure out why brain architecture is so tightly connected to consciousness. That is like the actual shape of the neural connections.
Mhm.
Right now we have these super simplistic models that, you know, reduce the amount of neurons and synapses down. I don't know, what is it, 1,000-fold or a million-fold or something. But imagine we go, breakthrough. This is why brains are doing the things that they're doing. This is why brains produce consciousness. And it's actually in the three-dimensional structure, the geometry of the brain. So imagine then we model, you know, the next gen, maybe 10, 20 years, whatever. Not only is the behavior indistinguishable, but it has a similar enough brain structure where
Mhm.
maybe it's not, you know, carbon, it's silicon. Do you think to yourself, I have to now, because I don't know whether any other mind is conscious or whether this entity is conscious, I have to just say I'm going to treat this as an intelligent, sentient thing because the stakes are too high for
Yeah,
me getting it wrong.
let's say that would be like some sort of robot Pascal's wager, you
Yeah,
know, AI Pascal's wager, right?
yeah,
Where you treat it as if sentient simply because you don't know, and if you know, if you're already taking Pascal's wager, which is you know, okay, I'll believe that there's a God simply because the risks of not believing are so high, and now you've done the robot version of the Pascal's wager, I'm going to treat them as if sentient, etc. You do wind up with a similar set of moral restrictions, or at least moral considerations. Now, fortunately and unfortunately, humans are not in agreement about even how to treat other humans in most moral situations.
yeah.
So just to take a situation where I think people could find themselves in a, let's say, near term, and let's put near term being a couple decades, um, a war that involves these AIs on each side. Okay. Now, in a lot of historical encounters of war, there hasn't been necessarily a joint agreement that there is an ending to the war where people actually stop fighting. In many circumstances, it has been absolute demolishment and devastation. The war is not over until one side wins completely, genocides the other side. Okay, it just completely wipes them out. Or maybe leaves their women alive to steal the bloodline, right? There would be a similar version of that where, let's say you have just robots fighting each other because we've removed the human element for the most part, similar to the way that we have drones being used now in a lot of the proxy wars, or the asymmetric wars, where it is against these what they quote unquote terrorist cells inside of countries, where we're not actually at war with the country, so to speak. We're just at war with certain actors inside of that element. But let's say that we have a old version state-by-state war, but now it's just mostly robots fighting each other. There would be a similar question as to whether or not it would be moral to eliminate the other side's AI entirely as a precautionary measure in order to, possibly prevent another war. Now, at some level, if that happens in 5 years and we just have, yes, maybe we threw ChatGPT into these robots, maybe we'd all be fine saying, no, they're not, it's just a dumb box. It's okay. We can eradicate it. No big deal. At some point we might, even if soldiers are fighting alongside these AIs, it's the same sort of bonding thing, right? They're going to draw an emotional attachment. I mean, we draw emotional attachments to imaginary robots that we watch in television programs. So I can imagine that being significantly more difficult when you're actually fighting alongside of it.
Yeah, that's a wild idea. I haven't definitely, instinctually, I feel like, oh, that maybe it should be expected that creatures of one species are just going to, by default, value themselves over other entities, even if they're sentient. Because when I think about, how many embodied LLM machines could be destroyed in order to sort of try to balance out, like, do you kill the, if you explode or dismantle 100,000, does that have the moral weight of one person? If you can make those kind of comparisons, at least intuitively. And I'm like, oh, well, humans all the way. Like, it doesn't matter. Even if we had some, like an EMP, right? That just destroyed all the robots on the planet. Once they're sophisticated, I'm like, yeah, that is not going to move me nearly the same as if you have, a human die. So I guess that's speciesism, which maybe should be the expectation.
Well, no, and let's say that would, let's, again, going back to the previous agreement at the beginning of the discussion, that is the correct stance. Let's say that for all eternity, that is the correct stance. That doesn't imply that everyone will agree with you on that stance, right? So you, being the correct position holder, launching the EMP and committing a robot holocaust makes you the Hitler of that generation, right?
That's so wild. That's so wild.
And that, of course, there would be arguments. It wouldn't be unanimous that you would be the bad guy, but the number of people who might think, oh man, this person just extinguished all of these lives.
Yeah.
You would have that moral weight. Now, let's say in the rosiest scenario, we do avoid doing that we've trained ourselves to understand that at the end of the day, these are just machines and they don't have that soul. Let's assume that we've done that. The complications still will arise as to people processing the loss, right? So you're still going to wind up having people have to emotionally go through it, whether or not they accept intellectually that they haven't or not. So there's still going to be a lot of effects like that, no matter how you slice it.
That's an interesting point. And even when we're dealing with humans and tragedies, if parts of members of your community are killed, or like individual friends, much less a large number of people in your community, that is obviously, horrible. But when the tragedy goes larger than your immediate community, it becomes so abstract, it's impossible to process. It's like you think about World War II and how many humans, you can't, like, you literally can't even comprehend the situation. So I wonder if this is going to happen again with the, if there are, when there are wars between complex robots, that if you don't have the emotional bond with them, it's very abstract. And it's like, yeah, that's what happens with war. But it's the community robots that went off to war to fight for you that you grieve over,
Right. Now, maybe in a military situation, it'll be somewhat similar, because I could imagine that, the military does not attempt to remove the human element entirely, but they do attempt to emphasize aspects of humanity in one respect, and then downplay other aspects of humanity. You don't want a person making decisions purely from a empathy or sympathy standpoint when they are on a particular mission, right? You want them as simply as instruction followers. So
robots.
perhaps that would be the location where robots would simply be their most psychopathic, let's say. They will not have any ability to be emotive. They will not mimic human nature in that way, and therefore that sort of problem will not be there on the battlefield for soldiers. Let's say that does not change people. That does not change people's reflection when they see their robots in their house and have already attributed some sort of sentience or nature to them, thinking about those robots in the battlefield, right? It doesn't, because it will be remote for them. They won't necessarily be able to detach a sentiment they've already granted one entity and detach it from the other.
Yeah, it would be like, if you've got hired help or you've got a maid that, the people in the family connect to, and then the maid goes off to war and gets killed. It's like,
right. Yeah. I jokingly, there's a open project that's been around for a couple of years of people trying to actually build the schematics and physically build Johnny Five from Short Circuit.
Mm.
Okay, and if you're familiar with that movie, it's a movie from the 80s where there was a robotics project that the military was creating, and they made these 5 advanced AI models, and one was hit by electricity from a lightning strike, a surge of electricity, and it made it conscious. Okay, that's the overall story. And you're familiar with the character Wall-E?
Yeah.
The physical nature of Wall-E is based off of the physical nature of this original robot from the 80s, from this movie Short Circuit.
Okay.
So the same type of binocular eyes that handle most of the expressions it creates to emote to a human audience is the same. It's the same sort of situation. And these people have wanted to make this Johnny Five replica that is able to move, it's able to have the same voice from the movie, et cetera, et cetera. And just the other day, my first thought is, let's throw ChatGPT into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now it doesn't have a pre-recorded set of things it can say. I can now talk to it and imagine that movie is now reality and trick myself, because that's the logical thing to do, is trick myself into thinking that this thing from my childhood is now alive, right? It is now an actual thing in reality. And so even if it is completely removed from being human, it will still now be able to be possible to create these entities that have this nostalgia standpoint, this thing where you could swear it's alive. People would probably make Rosie the robots. You just mentioned maids, right? If you get a maid, someone in your family is going to want a Rosie the robot, right? Because the Jetsons was such a staple of the American culture. Of course, you're going to make a Rosie the robot. You're gonna grab the AIs that synthesize voices. You're going to take samples of her voice from the show. You're going to make sure that she sounds like Rosie the robot. And now you're the Jetsons. Like, that's the stuff you can predict is going to happen, because of course it is.
Okay, I want to play with a couple of ideas here. First of all, there's something inside me that says humans shouldn't be doing that. So there's something about the possibility that there is this illusion of sentience in a machine, or a sufficient amount of uncertainty in whether there's sentience in the machine, and then we're projecting something onto a very complicated pile of dirt, pile of sand. And the idea that we're going into this world, and it might be illusory. These connections might be fundamentally, like, the ability to form these emotional connections among humans is maybe even the meaning of life. It's so wonderful. Like we've got circuitry that's there. It's super powerful for a good reason. And the idea of creating something which is not sentient, if it's actually not conscious, and not a person, and bonding with it, that seems icky.
Right.
So I mean, on the practicality aside of like, should you treat the robot this way or whatever, like, is there not some what is this? Do you feel the same intuition that like, ooh, we might be creating a theater for ourselves that is not healthy?
Oh, I think absolutely we are, but I also think that there is no other way to expect it to evolve that way. Because if we start to, let's say that we are attempting to be mature about this, and we say no, we're not going to give it any um, any expressiveness that hacks our empathy circuits, right, and allows us to connect to it. Now we have a robot that is able to communicate perfectly in a human-like, it has the capability of communicating with us on that human-like level, but we are specifically telling it not to. And now it's going to interact with us as the most psychopathic person, like not to be too disparaging, but the stereotype of a person who is autistic saying the most cold and heartless thing that you possibly can, just because it happens to be somewhat factual in nature at the wrong time, right? That would be the robot we would be creating, and we would hate that. Okay, even if that would be the correct thing to go to make sure we don't ever confuse them with being sentient, that would piss us off. That would anger us to no doubt, and we'd say, look, I just said my friend died, don't say that happens.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, say that you understand that I feel bad. Okay.
Right.
And then so it'll say, oh, I understand that you feel bad, and we will interact with it in a way where we will always,
Yeah.
at the moments that we are most emotional, want it to actually have the ability to fake it, because not faking it is absolutely annoying to us at the time.
So this makes me think of something which it's kind of a beautiful thought. I don't know if this is correct or not, but it makes me think of the philosophies which attribute spirits to inanimate objects. So
Mhm.
when you think of like, I don't know, you've got a wooden box in your house,
Mhm.
and it's just a piece of wood. You can smash it, you can burn it, you do whatever you got to do because it's just a box. That is one way of thinking about what the phenomenon is, and it's probably correct. There's another almost ethical or aesthetic um, perspective, which is to say, okay, maybe the box isn't sentient, but there's still a sense in which I can stand in relation to this object in a way that is good for my soul,
Mhm.
and I can treat the box as if it has some kind of personality, or it has some kind of, I could say there's a particular, if we're not talking about a box because that's hard, it could be like a piece of furniture.
Mhm.
We say, well, to give maximum respect to the furniture, you have to put the furniture in the right place in the room. Like where does
Mhm.
the couch want to be?
Mhm.
And it sounds, it can sound silly, but there's also something beautiful to that idea that you recognize what the thing is, that the couch has a certain geometric structure, and it can find a certain beautiful relation with the structure of your room.
Right.
And
Right.
you're sort of in a mind state where you're giving respect to things, even if they are, inanimate
Well,
objects.
there's a degree to which that is similar to something we were mentioning earlier, which is if I'm treating these robot uh, automatons in a particular way, it could rub off on my treatment of
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
Similarly, the way that you treat the things you own, the way that whether you care for them or not,
Yeah.
is generally going to reflect on the way that you behave in other situations, right? It is, some of it is symbolic, but the symbolism is also guided to be respected simply because that is a structure that you repeat
Yeah.
elsewhere, right?
Right.
So if you do not have a personal sense of aesthetics, that lack of aesthetics inside your home is probably going to be reflective in elsewhere, and that could, and let's take a practical standpoint. um, Developers often have various subtypes of talents, and some people are absolutely abysmal at creating user interfaces. User
Yeah.
interfaces are a very important component of functioning software, but good developers may be absolutely terrible at creating a user interface because they wind up having no sense of aesthetics
Right.
and functionality together. So they'll focus on functionality, and now they will have in their own heads, if it's one single developer developing an interface, they know where all the menus are. They know where they put everything because it was already mapped to their brain without a sense of organization on that side, right? So those are absolutely things that translate into different arenas. And so there's definitely an overlap with how you respect things and how
Yeah.
you respect people, et cetera. So it's all, yeah, it's absolutely going to overlap those
Yeah.
circuitries.
I feel like that's a more abstract and flexible moral framework than trying to make consciousness calls.
Mhm.
Is to try to say, yeah, I would agree with there's a specific technical term for solipsism where it's not that you have a positive belief that yours is the only mind. It's that, you believe you can't have, certainty about the existence of other
Right,
minds.
right.
There's different forms of solipsism. It takes
Mhm.
different treads, but that's one of them. And I agree. I don't think you can know that there's another mind present. You just guess. But anyway, there is something beautiful about the idea of trying to orient yourself in the world such that if you find out someday that the object you thought didn't have any consciousness does have consciousness, that you treated it with some sort of respect, even if it's an animal on a farm. If it's a rabbit you shot and you got to eat it, there's a way to still, maybe not rabbits, who wants to eat rabbits, right? There's still a way to interact, even if
Right,
you're, killing the thing or breaking the thing or burning the object, which still has some respect for it.
right,
That might be
right. And
that worldview might take off once we go into, robot world, because I don't know, it's more generally applicable, I guess.
yeah, and we're going to find out that there's a lot of assumptions that are built into people's worldviews that is mainly driving how they handle this coming um, mixture, this coming development of both the acceleration of artificial intelligence capabilities and coexisting with human society. We're going to find out that a lot of things are ultimately rooted in people's um, their metaphysical sorts of beliefs. So let's take, for example, someone like Sam Harris, who is a very hard determinist. He thinks that everyone's perception of free will, everyone's perception of being able to make choices, all of it is an illusion, and everything is predicated off of the atoms that are interacting with each other, the molecules that are interacting, and there is absolutely no control. Okay? In that type of environment, there isn't even a question of, are these computers, are these robots sentient? Do they have consciousness? Because they're performing the same job we are.
Right.
We are as insignificant as the robots. The only difference is that we, being trained through evolution to respect self-preservation as part of the biology, we are then going to treat it that way and be adversarial to the robots if they are threatening our self-preservation. But that's all deterministic.
Yeah.
In that landscape, right? So there is no moral difference between the robot and the human if it's all deterministic. But then people who do not take the hard determinism, and we don't have to parse out all of the various alternatives, but people who do allow for free will, whatever that might mean to them, can then have that confusion as to whether or not the robot has it, because at some point they will, a standard Windows computer is deterministic, cool, but then at some point the fluidity in which these systems are creating what appears to be more randomized degrees of freedom that would allow for free will to emerge conceptually, or at least in the external manifestation. That would be where they would start to question it, and we would find out that there would be these sets of underlying assumptions about the nature of reality that would wind up actually affecting people's perceptions, where they would actually come out on those questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're going to be a total determinist, then it's very hard for me to square the meaning of ethics with absolute determinism, because I'm thinking if truly fundamentally there's you don't have control over your thoughts,
Yeah.
you don't have control how your beliefs change, you can't choose anything. I don't see where ethics makes sense other than
Well,
just to say it's
you
like
were
a
always determined, you were always predetermined to be talking about ethics at the point that
yeah.
you were talking about ethics. So it's
Yeah, it's something, it'd be something like an aesthetic judgment where like some entities don't like when things happen in the world. I think that's about all you could say.
Yeah, I don't want to get too in the weeds on that because that's another long conversation. But the standpoint is that people who believe in that sort of determinism are going to, in a different way, find equivalence, because
Yeah,
there wouldn't be no underlying mystical component. And I'm using the term mystical
right, right.
as just to say it's the unknown, right? It's
Yeah,
this component that most people feel does not fit determinism, right? But it's unexplainable. We don't have a hard explanation that answers all of our questions, because anytime we start to propose answers, it raises more questions about the things we currently know.
right.
But the people who have the hard deterministic route are going to have these robots be equal to us for other reasons, because they are just hard deterministic devices exactly the same way we are. It's just a different way that the determinism manifests.
Right. Okay, I want to shift to one more topic here that's related, and I feel also anxiety thinking about, which is let's say, the political and I don't know, almost religious aspects to this. So I can imagine a world in the future where there's an AI which gets the designation of super intelligent, whatever that means, doesn't matter, where there are countries which defer to the AI to make their decisions because they think, okay, this is something that's smarter than we are. And so whatever it outputs, we're going to do politically because this, higher intelligence is talking to us. And very connected to this possibility in the domain of politics is, I'm just going to call it cults. Where I can imagine we're probably already in this world where there are multiple AI cults out there already, would be my guess. But I could see, maybe not on a political level, but as like in a smaller, like a religious context, especially once these things are embodied, we're gonna have people who are treating the robot effectively like gods, where this thing knows more than we do, or it's more than we do.
As an oracle, the roles that mystical oracles might have had.
Yeah, an oracle, that'll be one part of it, but also as gods, if they spend a lot of their time, let's say, in the digital world, and if you think about, like, if you imagine the AI as being omniscient in some digital dominion, it knows the state of everything in the dominion, and all of that information gets plugged into the AI, and then it can output states into the physical world. So it would sort of be like a god in that context. So, okay. So how do you wrap your head around this?
Well, that's going to involve a question of how fast we integrate the augmented reality systems into what we are doing. So there's a long-standing rule of thumb when it comes to software development, and that is, if two features exist, at some point people will combine them. So if you create feature A and feature B, they're oftentimes in software development, you will wind up with these bug reports. A user reports a bug, and you will wind up with these things, and you look at them, and it is two things you never thought people would think to put together that you've made in the system. The system has capability A and capability B. This ticket is because you never actually tested the two together, because it doesn't make sense to you to use them together, but this user did it, and therefore it created a problem. How fast and how quickly we are able to make progress in the visual, I'll call it the visual hallucination space, okay, where Oculus is owned currently by Meta, which is basically Facebook, and they are working on attempting to create these 3D environments inside of their Oculus headsets. Now, I've only tried an Oculus headset briefly, few hours once, and it suffers from many flaws when it comes to sensory immersion, and that is, of
Hmm.
course, you're always feeling this weighted item on your head, so you can't help but be reminded that you are not in a
Hmm.
real space with it. um, uh, and it's not perfect when it comes to uh, mapping your real world movements into the artificial environment it is creating. However, I will say that it is getting decently good at mapping those things. So right now we have several competing AI systems that are making headway and breaking new ground in this year, or well, last year if you want to include that. And one of them is the Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, Dolly image generators, where you can take the image prompt
Hmm.
and create an image that basically is what you asked for. You know, if you want to take George W. Bush and merge it with a panda bear, you'll get George W. Bush in a panda with a panda bear, and it'll be totally what you would think of. Yep, that's George
Hmm.
W. Bush and a panda bear. It's, so the ability to create combinations of things that don't exist in reality is going to be there. Now, the way that those systems work involves creating a lot of noise and then removing noise based off of whether or not a image classifier says, yes, this is more like the image that we're trying to talk about, and no, this is less like it, and making choices based off of that until you've removed enough noise from one of these images to get exactly what a human would say is that image. Okay, so you have a lot of noise, you have almost nothing, and then you keep removing noise in such a way that eventually the image classifier says, yep, that's this image. So when we upload images to the internet and they try to sort them through algorithm, they've already trained the AIs to say, this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a happy person, this is a sad person. They're trying to map all these features, and we've inverted that with these image generators to make noise and take noise and turn it into something that we actually want. Using that same technology, you can only have a little bit of noise from where you started and ask it for something new to start to create these immersive environments that look 3D, where you're actually just shifting the image over. So if I turn my head left, now it's trying to recreate what might be
Hmm.
there from an image on the left. Or maybe it takes a 3D model that is not particularly refined. So if you think about the first 3D games or the older 3D games, where it was great at the time, but now obviously it's not as realistic looking as the modern graphics. But you start to then take those as your base layer, add some fuzziness to them, and now try to create extra hyper realistic visuals on top of
Hmm.
that. You can see a trajectory where those Oculus type units could convincingly create visuals that are indistinguishable, for except for the most discerning eyes with time and judgment, an environment that looks real. Now you still have this physical weight on your head that's doing it to remind you you're not in there. But of course, that's a problem that will be solved over time by
Yeah.
technology. So how quickly that those things start to merge, you will now have non-player characters, the NPCs that we all accuse the other of being online. Okay, we'll have these NPCs that will literally be NPCs in these virtual environments, and we
Yeah.
will literally have malicious actors creating these NPCs in those malicious environments, and we will wind up in a realm where everything that's passing this Turing test, the classical Turing test, is an open question as to whether or not we already do it on Twitter, but it's like, am I talking to somebody who is mimicking human gestures, human emotions in an environment where everyone is artificial already in their presentation? I it's
Uh,
that's going to be very bizarre, because I can imagine, I would bet 100% that there will be many manipulative fake romances
yeah.
in this parasocial environment that is augmented by these headsets. And so that will be a component, I think, that's going to be less, it's going to be as emotionally disruptive to have, people get upset with catfishes, but the catfishes target a very specific set of vulnerable people. The augmented reality ones could leave many people open to a vector of attack they were not prepared for. Right?
So
Go ahead.
I do want to talk about the political situation, but before that, this is a really good rabbit hole to go down. So I have wondered with AI stuff about how what kind of cultural traits we're going to develop so that this doesn't mess all of our brains up. And I'm going to call it, it's like the extended concept of an air gap.
Mhm.
So, like, if you have a computer and you don't want it to be hacked, what do? Well, don't plug it into the internet for one. Like, if you can have an air gap where
Yeah,
you're not plugged in, then you're
yeah,
less likely to be hacked. And so this is like air gapping, not just to make sure the AI doesn't, Skynet doesn't take control of your computer and blow it up and make your house catch on fire, but it's like a cultural air gap where we're going to have to come up with some new set of concepts that I think that this would be wise to do, to say, okay, when you put the headset on or when you press go on the brain chip or whatever, when you have to know clearly the differentiation between the virtual space and physical space and normal reality. And if we don't, I think a bunch of people aren't going, they already are. I think people have blurred the lines between physical and digital to their own detriment. But I wonder how many of the problems that are being presented to us in the near future by AI are going to be actually solvable just with some sort of cultural wisdom, where you go, like, wisdom develops over time. There are lots of things out in the world that are very dangerous that can mess with your mind. Drug use, for example, is one of those where, one approach to drug use is like, don't take any of them ever. Another is like, it's fine, it's not going to hurt you. I think
mhm.
somewhere the wisdom is somewhere in the middle ground, where it's like, hey, look, you got to know the risks going into it. You got to have the right set and setting, and then you can use this,
Yeah, yeah.
technology in a way that it's not going to screw you up. So I wonder with this VR, you're going into a cult mystical land in which there are going to be different gods that you interact with that are NPCs that are out there really, and they're
Mhm.
going to be talking to you and building friendships with you and telling you to do things in your real life. Like, we're going to need like a cultural firewall
Right,
to make sure that people don't lose their minds here.
right. Now, um, obviously, and if you look at the species in total, you can either say that we're really good at doing that or we're really bad at doing that. And we're really good at doing that in that we've survived this long, having analogous, although not identical situations repeatedly. Okay, so the social media is has a similar categorization of problems. Okay,
Yeah.
you have these, for lack of a better word, influencers who construct a completely artificial reality, and you can be shown the photos and then how the actual scene looked, and it's always fake and made up, and they're
Yeah.
they're they're pretending they're in locations they're not. They're pretending they're about to eat something that they didn't actually eat. It was just someone trying to throw some advertising dollars in their way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and and there are many people who believe that they are being shown a pathway to success, and then they've therefore tried to emulate what they are seeing, and they wind up not they wind up ruining their lives to some degree, or at least wasting time pursuing some things that are
Right.
not healthy for them overall. So
Right.
on that aspect, we could say we do a very bad job. However, on average, we have created a set of societies that are so far beyond what we could have ever really imagined on a whole just a couple hundred years ago, with a size of our population that is astronomical compared to where we were just several hundred years ago, on the total population of Earth. So on one level, it's a huge success. On another level,
Yeah.
we still are doing this horribly.
Yeah.
But that's why I said earlier, I wouldn't necessarily avoid participating in the emotional connections with these items, provided I am doing so simply to navigate how to train the next generation of me
Well, true.
to also do that, because otherwise I would be leaving them open to vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think recent technology with the internet, social media, and our hyper connectivity gets shit on a lot by people, and they think this is like a net negative for humans. And I think that's very premature. Like, when you think about how long it takes for cultures and humanity to learn principles about what's good, what's bad, what's dangerous, what's not. Like, these technologies have been around, what, 20, some of them less than 20 years. So I already know, I mean, I have these conversations with people all the time about how they want to reduce the influence of technology and the internet and social media on their lives. And a lot of people have a lot of success at feeling happier when they, get rid of social media or at least limit it to particular parts of the day. So I feel like there is a learning process here that I'm more optimistic now than I have been for, people in a widespread sense trying to get a hold of technology and not have it control their lives. And I think we're making progress here. At least that's my observation.
Well, I want to say that there's a degree I agree with that sentiment, but I think a lot of times people who hold that sentiment seem to discount too much the negative externalities that come with those types of advancements, and they fail to acknowledge them in a way that basically says that's somebody else's problem. Okay, so they if we look at how large the human population is, and we look at some of our measures of whether or not people are in poverty, absolutely destitute, and we look at all of those metrics we try to come up with to not deceive ourselves, and we say, okay, things are pretty good. But then we also can, in that aspect, fail to see the periods of difficulty and pain that real people go through as certain things in society progress on average. So I want to let's take employment displacement as one of those scenarios. Okay, going back to time's beginning, it's if you have two countries and borders, and you have a comparative advantage in particular skill sets, and one of those comparative advantages is in the other country, you're going to start outsourcing the job demand to that particular comparative advantage. So Mexico being at the United States southern border, there are immigrants who come across who are not necessarily following the rules that we have set up for immigration, and they are offering services that people in this country would otherwise offer. Or you take the technological advancement of any particular revolution in technology, whether it be the light bulb to candle makers, or the automobile to people selling horse and carriages and things like that. And you say, okay, the car came through and it displaced all of those people with the horse and buggy, and now society is better off for it overall. And you just ignore that entire period where the people who were doing the horse and buggy are now lost and don't know how to navigate a portion of their lives. Now you look at the scale in which those changes came, and to the people at the time they were fast, but I think we can agree technological advancements and technological changes are occurring at a rate now that is unforeseen when looking at the rate of change of historical time periods, such that the displacement now could be large and significant, and taking the approach that it would just be like light bulbs to candle makers, or the car to horse and buggy, overlooks the actual near-term devastation in the human condition for particular sets of people. Even if you take the case that 100 years from now will be fine, that current time slice can actually involve a lot of suffering and confusion, which could cause a lot of additional externalities. Okay, people who lose their jobs, who maybe don't have this, we'll call it to disparage it a little bit, this sophisticated, erudite perspective. The people who are actually losing their jobs because of this displacement, they might turn to drugs. They might further cause disruptions in their immediate life and their families' extended lives.
They might bomb data centers,
They might get desperate and bomb some data centers. Okay, those are real effects of the process. And now again, we could jump to the conclusion and say that 50 to 100 years from now it'll all be great and rosy. That doesn't mean that it was without significant issues that probably should be paid attention to, as opposed to just brushed aside with people say this all the time and it's always fine, quote unquote.
I think I definitely think that is the right take to acknowledge that there's going to be lots of growing pains. If we come to the other side of this, there's going to be significant job displacement. That's going to be it's always complex when you have technology that is shifting economic factors substantially. And I am optimistic that humans will be able to adjust, but it's not going to be without uh, pain to individuals, families, communities. I mean, in my family, I have roots in coal mining of Western Virginia, and those places still have not recovered from decades of reduced coal usage. So you had a shift in you had these communities that were built up around the coal mine, and then for whatever reason, coal demand goes down, companies shut down, regulations take over, and you have an economic, cultural, social depression that can literally last 40 years plus. The way I think about these related concepts is as like adolescence, where when you think about the Industrial Revolution and the pollution, the real undeniable pollution that was created in the Industrial Revolution with factories that were putting crap up in the air, that damages people, like that is harming people in the world. That is a real negative externality. But I do think it's helpful to think of it as adolescence, that once you push through that stinky, pimply period, that's pollution, you have enough wealth then where you can turn around and clean up your factories. You have enough wealth, then you can actually solve some of the problems that the adolescence presents. And I think that's a similar situation here, where we might be going through some adolescent pains with this new technology. And once we get through some unknown amount of time, maybe we'll be able to solve some of those problems.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a argument for something analogous, as you just outlined. And again, I think the key point in there is just to make sure that when having such discussion, it is not just blithely dismissed that these pains will actually occur to real human beings who actually exist, and their lives are not insignificant simply because society as a whole has to do this in order to get to a better junction point, right? If you just to even take it from the standpoint of trying to reduce those negative externalities because you don't want people to get desperate and attempt to blow up the data centers, right? You want to avoid that, because now that's even more of a complication to progress to the next point. So even if you're doing it cynically and simply to placate people, you still want to keep that in mind, because angering people, they always have the sharpened sticks that can overturn whatever you are trying to do. The problem of a person who is interrupting your life is often easily solved by ending that person's life, and that's not an avenue we want people to think is justified in taking. So to bring it to politics, because you wanted to head there, I wanted to start with some sense of immediate adoption that would be very parallel and analogous to where politics might head, and that would be technology companies that wish to adopt using the current technology set of GPT and these other large language models into their business. Okay, and from there it can probably extend out into the political realm, because there will be analogs. So you might have seen some people on the job landscape doomsayer circuit saying that this will eliminate 300 million jobs in a short period of time, and programmers thinking that they have, even though for a period of time they chose the best course of study, now they will be replaced because GPT-4 is able to write code. And there is a degree to which those tools can be utilized, but I think one of the things you will find is that far too many companies as actors, far too many agents that are company units, are going to overestimate the capabilities of these large language models and bet that they will be able to accomplish things that they actually cannot, because oftentimes you wind up with a managerial system where the people making these decisions, you can see the similarities and the effects of outsourcing to foreign countries, because the development work is somewhat easy to outsource. There are companies who, let's say, are mature and realize that too much outsourcing actually causes a detriment to you, even though on the immediate price point, the hourly wage of a developer in Thailand is a much better savings, and you can get comparable code. It's like the same product, you're paying a lot less. Those short-term things are overshadowed by long-term investments in human capital and people who know the business inside out, people who are actually part of the company,
right,
developing its trajectory. They will make the same types of errors. The companies that do all of their stuff outsourcing will make the same types of errors with the chat GPTs, and they will wind up having gotten rid of talent who would have been the only talent capable of utilizing these language models appropriately. So I think the doomsayers are overestimating the ability of this current technology to replace a significant amount of labor.
Well, and that's a perfect segue into the political situation, because what I fear is that we're going to have, the decisions are going to be outsourced to this thing because there's particular beliefs about superintelligence and what that means and how a superintelligence stands in relation to humans. And there's going to be a lot of people who think that what you're this is the way I put it is you have a responsibility in the presence of superintelligence to melt into a puddle. That's what they're going to think. Okay, so I have this oracle here, and it's going to spit out things to me that I'm not going to understand. And so when it says now's the time to jump off the bridge, I'm going to jump off the bridge. And I think companies are going to do that. They're going to be bad decisions because they're not going to be able to use the tech correctly, or the tech is not going to solve the problems they think it's going to solve. And then I extend that to states, and I go, okay, well, now you got an interesting situation where you might have a small state somewhere that thinks they're going to get ahead by outsourcing their thinking to a machine, and they end up making, disastrous regulations or policies, like we have an AI that pulls a John von Neumann. John von Neumann was convinced that there were nuclear war between the U.S. and the Soviets were inevitable. So then, because of mathematics, the U.S. should preemptively drop nuclear warheads on the Soviets. So, like, what happens when we go into a world where the AI is making the decisions, and it turns out,
Dr. Strangelove is basically that movie with just now throw Chat GPT as the brains behind both networks, right? And it's the same. The movie plays out identically, right?
Yeah.
So I think one thing that would have to be studied by people, which is not hard to do in general, is just look at how they deal with decision-making processes and granting contracts to contractors now to deliver certain products, and how often those promises never come to fruition, and how often those promises are now going to be given to either a company promising to utilize this technology to solve the problem, or somehow outsourcing it to an instantiation of this technology itself to solve. They can be kind of synonymous at this moment, because the logic that would be underpinning it is the person making the decision doesn't actually have the knowledge necessary to make the judgment of the avenue most likely to bring them fruition. So whenever you're a government and you have a desire to bring something to the people, and you're going to outsource a contract to a project, there's going to be many parameters of that decision that are actually completely unrelated to whether or not the person you're outsourcing it to can deliver on the promise. Some of it is going to be your ability to say that you saved people money. Okay, so if you can come up with a person in finance saying that this project is going to save money, and that this contractor is the lowest bidder or something along those lines, that might be unrelated to whether or not the project can be delivered. If nepotism gets involved, then nepotism obviously is disconnected from whether or not the project can actually be delivered. And so all of these thoughts and considerations that go into an activity that will ultimately possibly involve these large language models is already going to have that deficit before it has to deal with the deficit of what the large language model is capable of delivering.
Yeah.
So I think with that, you will find a lot of people promising those things. If people Google solar roadways, this was a mimetic commercial, um, where it was someone, I think the tagline was solar frickin' roadways, and it was like this bombastic announcer talking about this futuristic world of solving all generic progressives checklist of
Yeah.
unlimited energy that is the most green possible, converging on all of their hopes and dreams by placing these solar panels as your road. And so now, you're driving on a road that is actually providing the electricity for your entire community, and that this was the promise. And the company that was promising this got a whole bunch of grants, millions of
Right.
dollars, but I don't think there is a single working version of a roadway, even on a block radius,
Yeah.
ever delivered.
I think there's a prototype out in the desert somewhere, if I
Yeah.
recall.
So imagine innocently that there was no reason, as a general person seeing this being advertised, you had a reason to say that's bullshit. Okay. Now throw a whole population of people who have no specific knowledge to able to point that out and go, that's bullshit. Now throw the large language models as a replacement for that, and have all the experts going, this is groundbreaking and we have to actually blow up data centers because it's so important. And serious people who are knowledgeable also overpromising. Now, what is the average voter supposed to think whenever someone says that they're going to deliver a project on this? You're going to think whatever they say is possible. There's going to be a lot of overpromising going on.
Yeah.
I can't tell what projects are going to be stupidly enough given full benevolence to the all-powerful AI, but hopefully it's normal, stupid, wasteful stuff, and it isn't anything significant in the near
It
term.
doesn't have anything to do with the nukes. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't. Well, one thing I can say about the architecture of the governments in that realm is, if you take a look at the military's manuals and how they deal with the human problem of decision making and sensitive things like that, there's a lot of checks. You have a lot of redundancy that protects human error from getting to that endpoint of devastation. I'm not saying they're perfect systems. Obviously, they're not. But historically, at least, I can't describe what the situation is like now and the human talent available. But historically, if you look at what they've come up with, they have come up with many systems of redundancy that make human error less impactful on those serious items. You have the stereotype of two keys on the opposite side of the room that need turned by people at the same time as a safe check, so that there isn't one human point of failure. Things like that extended to a high degree are involved. So hopefully, if you were to say to the military, hey, let's do this, there would still be those people who remember why you have all those safe checks and go, hey, yeah, we're not doing that. And that's the exact, essentially what you get from that particular department. But the rest of it that doesn't have that perspective, I can imagine a lot of chaos. But also it would only take one country to be that stupid with a particular armament capability to cause a lot of havoc.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Kim Jong-un might be saying, "Oh, hey, ChatGPT-4."
Exactly. And the thing is, one's implicit philosophy of intelligence is going to matter here. When you're talking, like, intelligent people tend to really value intelligence. Sometimes they overvalue intelligence. And if you've been told stories that here is this magic box that is smarter than any human who's ever lived, and all of everybody combined, then you're going to go, okay, well, why wouldn't I just do what the magic box tells me to do? And I would not be surprised at all if that level of reasoning finds its way into states. I don't know. Hopefully not ones with nuclear capability, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah, and that's one of the oversights I was describing with regular companies in technology attempting to outsource things, and them probably finding out that they've overpromised what it can deliver. And that is, there will be at some point a need for what I'll just, for lack of a better term, call an orchestrator.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's someone who understands the limitations of the tool, the large language model tool, and its ability to produce code and oversee. I made a joke somewhere the other day that it'll be the first time in existence that a project manager actually became useful. And
Yeah.
that's an inside software joke, or possibly other
Oh,
environments
for
where
sure.
the person who is overseeing the project always has to be reminded the significance of things that are happening within the project. It is basically, to the developer themselves, useless in the endeavor,
But
other than being a shield for the client sending emails.
there's a possibility here that the lower level decisions will be made by ChatGPT 6, and then the orchestrator is ChatGPT 7 because it's so much smarter, you know?
Right, right. What you want, what will wind up happening is there will be a talent set, whatever the job description is called, but there will be a requirement of people to be well versed with utilizing the tool
Yeah.
that is GPT and these large language models, because they have an amazing ability to produce high volume and high quality um, either code or sets of important linguistic tools, like such as just documentation or outlining a development plan, where if you are used to the error that occurs in humans doing this endeavor, and you can allow yourself to expect similar dysfunction at times from the tool of GPT-4,
Mm-hmm.
then you would become this organizer, someone who is saying, okay, this is what I want. I'm going to review what you gave me. Okay, I like this aspect. I don't like that aspect.
Right.
Okay, because you are more capable of interfacing with the actual product that you're trying to create than the large language model, then it will become a tool. And then that will be a job, or a category of jobs where someone will be hired to interact with that in the short term. Now, of course, like I was saying, there will be people who just throw the entire job at the model and try to deliver whatever it comes up with, and they will not have anybody currently employed who knows how to actually navigate the product. But the point is that if people allow themselves to calm down for a moment, you will be able to integrate the technology in very, very productive ways. But that when it comes to local governments or even the federal government, there will be many, many stupid decisions where it is outsourced directly to that. And unfortunately, because it will be political in nature involving the government, the rhetoric will not be able to be separated from actually having the discussion on the level of what is it capable of and what is it not capable of, because
Yeah.
many of the people telling you it's not capable of doing something will be the ones whose jobs are at threat for it replacing them. So you will be able to accuse them of having a motive,
Right.
right, to keep them self-employed, which sometimes works out. We still have many unions that have very bizarre existences that can't be described in any way other than momentum keeping them alive. In New York, in some places in the arts, there's people who are part of this weird union. You might not even know that they're there. Their job is to turn on the lights inside of the theater or something, right? They're the light manager. They're part of the light managers union, and you go, how is this even a thing, right? That might wind up actually existing, and in this case possibly for good reasons, because the people being displaced are also those understanding the limitations of the technology. But that's the type of play that I would see in the political level, and it's going to be very tempting for people to promise the newest and greatest thing, because now it's all a buzz for people to jump on it in the short term. I don't know who's going to take the first bite and have egg on their face when it's a disaster, but
Yeah.
someone will be.
Well, so I want to close this down and put maybe potentially a positive spin on this. I was thinking about this earlier, and I don't have my mind made up, but it's very easy to come up with scenarios that are particularly scary to somebody who's interested in critical thinking and philosophy, where they're going to treat this thing as a truth robot and just mindlessly follow what it says. But then I think, we're already in that situation right now where people aren't critically thinking. They're just reading, they're just believing what the screen tells them. And what's on the other side of the screen is some human that is just generally getting his ideas from people who are in power above him. So I'm thinking, like, maybe the circumstance in which people are unthinking things, going around believing what they hear, I wonder if that method, as repugnant as it is to me, I wonder if it's going to be rewarded more by actually listening to ChatGPT and large language models, because the quality of information you get, at least right now, before their training sets are too biased, the quality of information you're getting out of the machine is going to be way higher than it is the
It
quality of information you get on CNN.
it certainly could. And I think that, humans are very fun and weird creatures, and when you have a group of people who don't necessarily know what the answer to a problem is, oftentimes anyone with an answer seems like they have something good, right? And so that's where they say that confidence
Mhm.
is what drives most things, and it's not because people are people are actually valuing confidence itself, but that confidence mimics a claim of truth.
Right.
It sneaks a claim of truth through, because confidence sounds like it makes you look experienced, and experience means that your output is more in line with truth. And uh, so if someone, let's assume that there is an adoption disparity where, even though this is available pretty much to everybody at the moment to go and interact with, that not everybody takes it on, or not everybody takes it on to the same degree, right? So you have someone who maybe talked to it for a couple moments, said, wow, that's neat, and then they went about their day. But then you have someone who is interacting with it all day and all night, understanding it's how to work with it. You have two people in that room. The person who's using ChatGPT, whether the answers are right or wrong, is going to look more confident because they're generating answers that are structured, they are coherent, they sound like they are well thought out. Because even when GPT is blazingly wrong,
Yeah.
it is blazingly wrong in the most hilarious, confident way, where it has
Yes.
no sense of humility. It's not expressing a seed of doubt.
And the crazy thing is that the dastardly thing is, it's not just the confidence. It'll be that it's an Oreo where the top layer of the Oreo is truth. And you go, wow, that's impressive. The middle of the Oreo is complete fabricated bullshit. And then the one right below it is also truth, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And so a human who is hiding the fact that they're getting their ideas from, one of these large language models, will take on that role of authority. And even if some of it's decent or whatnot, they will actually make advancements in the short term because of that gain in confidence, where they're the
Yeah.
ones who are talking to the oracle, whether or not the oracle has a high hit rate. I mean, there's a joke in many companies where people will find a way to fail upward, and that's where they have these ideas and they position themselves to like get a new job because they were the ones who pushed this big idea. Meanwhile, as they've abandoned their old job for the new job, the idea is failing miserably, and then they just keep leapfrogging their
Yep.
way up
Yep.
up the company ladder. That could be done probably with a little bit more finesse from the large language models. um, People will be able to fail their way upward, and the devastation wrought by just following the order of the large language model is hidden by, like, a delay of seven months or something.
Well, that it hits on a really interesting concept that we're not going to have time to go into, but is going to be very important, which is this pattern of what happens when there's some process that works, and then people realize the process works, and then they try to mimic the
Hmm.
appearance of the process
Hmm.
without grasping how it,
Right, right.
how to actually get the good result. And that, people are impressed by that. So it's like we were talking about confidence earlier. Confidence can, a healthy, justified confidence can come from competence.
Hmm.
And then if you pick that up, you go, oh, look, the person who's, getting the resources, getting the women is this confident person because they're competent. Well,
Right,
I'm just going to mimic the confidence. And then you
right,
have,
right.
that's how you get a bunch of arrogant assholes that are, maybe successful with their relationships. They don't have the underlying competence because they're doing the confidence thing. You see that pattern over and over and over and over.
Yeah, right.
People's language will change over time because this sounds like how the smart people are talking or whatever. So I think that pattern is going to reemerge with the LLM thing. People are going to go, oh, this is how the smart people are talking with the Oracle, and when they use the Oracle, it results in good outcomes. So I'm gonna give the appearance of using this technology in the same way.
Yeah. I actually have a way of summarizing that. It's actually something I'm I've had for a while summarizing it is that most people suffer from imposter syndrome, but most people are also playing a fake it till you make it strategy.
Yeah.
So that combination of effects is the exact two that create the scenario you're talking about, where you're
Right.
just mimicking what you're seeing as being the thing, and you actually get rewarded for it. That's a lot of places. So yeah, I think if we were going to tail end this, I think the short-term expectation is that things will progress rapidly, but the people will overshoot what it's capable of. And so you need to if you're concerned about this, you kind of need to ground yourself truly to the limitations of what these things can do to understand what the intermediate effects are, and bet that there will be more overshooting than genuine, complete, true, overhaul of this whole apparatus we have, and that you can't necessarily retreat all the way to let's say an Amish sort of lifestyle, that you will probably not be able to completely shield yourself from any of its effects. Whatever is coming, you're just going to have to find your way to navigate through. But if you attempt to ground yourself in its limitations, you will find out when people are overpromising, and that will give you the ability to hopefully only panic when it's truly time to panic, because you don't want to panic too often, too early, and have people think that you're crying wolf. Because there might be a time where you should panic about something. It might not be
Right.
the existence of these things, but it might be that a particular instance of them is being used in a particular way.
Right. Right. I
And
mean,
that
there
might
are
be
going to
the
be
thing.
killer robots out there that are coming for you at some point, because there's going to be malicious, actors. I mean, maybe not you individually,
Right, not you
but
individually, but
yeah,
in the
yeah.
landscape of things that
Right.
exist, there will be, they've already taken those quadrupedal dog-like
Yeah.
things and attached guns to them, of course,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because
Right.
what else are you going to put on it, right?
Right.
The sharks with frickin' lasers attached to
Right.
their heads, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I just think if you are concerned, just try to learn what its limitations truly are, and don't think that dismisses their threat, but just think that if a threat has to come from an angle that's different necessarily from their limitations, unless you're talking about humans
Mhm.
riding the limitations and pretending that it's actually working, then
Right.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap things up. You did say something that you don't think it'll be possible to do the Amish
Yeah,
approach,
yeah.
and we don't have. That's going to be its whole nother can of worms. I think that approach is going to be possible. Uh, um, I think that's going to be gaining in popularity. And I think there's going to be, like, going back to the air gap concept, I think people are going to air gap in that way, where they say, look, at least in the rural world, maybe in cities, there's just no way you're going to be able to avoid these things. The AI and the robots, in my opinion, they're going to be everywhere. But I do think the world is so gigantic that if you want to go back to trying to live in like the 1990s or maybe the 1890s, I think there's going to be opportunities to do that.
All right, well, I'll start increasing my Ace of Base CD collection so that I'll have something to sell whenever the 90s come back in that
That's a
little
great barter
concubine.
tool. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Now this has been a great conversation. I got to go get some food. I don't know if it's picked up on the microphone. My stomach's been growling for like a half an hour.
All right, well, good conversation, Steve.
Yeah, great talking with you.